I should have known the job was too good to be true. Make $200 a night to sit at an undisclosed location from sundown to sunup. No previous experience required. Non-disclosure to be signed before hiring. Candidates who break NDA will be sued for breach of contract. Must have a strong constitution and a high moral fiber. Interested parties call number below. For a college student who was struggling to pay tuition, car insurance, and keep food in the dorm fridge, this sounded too good to be true. I looked at the party offering the services and discovered that I knew them. Dr. Crandler was a biomed teacher who had a bit of a reputation for being out there. He was said to conduct experiments after hours in the science lab, and if he hadn't had tenure, it was pretty likely that he would have been fired. These were all rumors, of course. I'd had Dr. Crandler last year for entry-level human biomes, and he was a delight. He turned out to be a huge Romero fan and loved to talk about zombies and old horror movies. We'd really hit it off, and when I called the number, he sounded happy to hear from me. "Oh, thank God. I was hoping someone reliable would call. I've lost 3 this week, and I'm beginning to think that I'll have to stoop to drastic measures." Whatever drastic measures were, Doc C didn't elaborate. He just told me to come to the science lab at 5:15 sharp. "And not a moment later," he added, before hanging up and leaving me with more questions than answers. I wasn't sure what to expect, but $200 was $200, and that would be able to put something in my body that wasn't ramen noodles this week, if the job was legit. So, about 4:30, I hopped on my bike and made my way across to the Werner May Science Building. It's a huge old brick building that's been on campus since the 1940s. They say it's been home to a lot of famous research, and more than one questionable clinical trial. I'd started to wonder if Dr. C was going to try to experiment on me, and that's why he was being so secretive. I decided that if that was the case, 200 wasn't enough. I had enough trouble scoring ladies with my pizza face, and I doubted having 4 arms or 2 heads would help matters much. I stepped through the door at about 5 o'clock sharp, and Dr. Crandler looked up excitedly. "Prompt as always. I remember that from my class. You were always early, and I like a student who's punctual. Come this way and let me show you what I'm working on. Before we start out, though..." He set a non-disclosure agreement in front of me, and I looked over it before signing my name to it. It was pretty standard stuff. Don't talk about what you see. Don't talk about what you're working on. Don't tell the media. Don't post it on the internet. Oops, guess I messed that part up. Yada 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 yada. After that, he tossed a black hood onto the table and told me to put it on. I hesitated, not having asked him anything about what we were doing yet. "You're, not gonna experiment on me, right, Doc?" He laughed, but it didn't sound particularly merry. No, my boy. I would never experiment on you. I have specific parameters, and I'm afraid you just don't meet them." I wasn't sure whether to be glad or insulted, but I put the hood on anyway. He led me through a door, down some stairs, outside, back inside, and then down some more stairs. Finally, we came to our destination, and when he took the hood off, I was in a little room about the size of an average dorm room. Inside was a table, a chair, and a glass jar with something floating inside. It was roughly the size of a spud, though if it was a potato, it was one of those big old Idaho jobs. I'd say it was about 2 feet tall, maybe half a foot wide, and it just sort of floated there placidly. "This is your job," Dr. C said, pointing at the jar. "What, just watch this thing? Easy peasy," I said, not yet understanding what I was agreeing to. "Just watch it till I get here to relieve you. Be careful, it's very tricky. It may try to get you to let it out. Do not let it out under any circumstances. For that, we'll pay you $200 a night." I put out my hand, being a man who signs deals with a shake, and Dr. C pumped my arm one good time before saying he was going to leave now. "I'm going to lock you in. If you have to urinate, there's a bucket in the corner. There are snacks and water in the mini fridge over there, though I would prefer if you not take your eyes off that jar." He started to protest about having to whiz in a bucket, but I just nodded and told him not to worry about it. A deal was a deal, as my old man liked to say, and when he left, I heard the door lock behind him. So, I settled in and took out my phone as I surfed Reddit and tried to stay awake. I kept an eye on the jar, looking up about every 30 seconds, but mostly I just sat there and tried not to fall asleep. That was the hardest part. It was boring, just sitting there for 10 to 12 hours, and I made a mental sticky to bring some coffee tomorrow. Doc had some snacks in the fridge, but kale chips and pita chips with hummus are not what a man desires when he's trying not to zonk out. The weird little thing in the jar didn't help matters much either. It was boring. All it did was float there, but I guess that wasn't quite true. Sometimes I would look up and find it looking at me, its weird brown body seeming to watch me. It couldn't really be doing that, since it didn't have any eyes, but I still felt very seen as I sat there on my phone. I made a note to bring a charger too, but luckily it lasted till the doc came back to let me out. He smiled as he handed me my $200 in cash at the end of my shift. "Do you feel anything? Any headaches or nausea?" I told him I didn't, and he invited me to come back tomorrow night. I told him for sure, and left 200 bones the richer. I kept watching his little science project for the next few weeks, and ended up with an extra $1,400 in my pocket. I agreed to do it 7 nights a week, and as spring began, the nights got a little shorter too. Soon the sun was going down closer to 8, and I didn't have to show up until 7:30 or 8 o'clock. Getting a couple of $100 for 10 hours of work was boss, and I got a lot of Raid Shadow Legends played or Reddit scoped while I sat there and collected moolah for sitting on my ass. When I arrived Tuesday of the next week, however, something had changed in my little potato cash cow. The thing had an ear. Doc sat me down as the hood came off and asked if I noticed anything different about the little blob. I looked at it critically, but couldn't really see anything different. Doc didn't really like this answer and told me to look harder. After a few minutes of coming up with nothing, he sighed in an exasperated kind of way and pointed. "It has acquired an auditory opening for vocal resignation." The look I gave him must have told him all he needed, because he just shook his head and tapped the tank. "It has an ear hole." And I finally got it. After some looking, I realized what he was talking about, and he seemed pretty proud of himself. "We've been working with chemical stimuli, and I had a breakthrough when I finally developed some form of communicational peripheral." How do you know it can hear you?" It was his turn to look puzzled, until I pointed out that it didn't have any way to let him know that it could hear him. "Well, it kind of wiggles around when we talk to it or play music. It hadn't done that much before, so we think it must be able to hear us." He left after that, and I made sure to tune the volume up on my video some for the little dude, or dudette, so he could listen too. It definitely bounced around a little, dancing in the water a bit as it moved around in its glass tank. I thought it was a little funny, and turned the volume way up as it wiggled and wobbled. By the end of the week, it had 2 ear holes and some little baby ears to go along with it. The doc told me to take a few weeks off after that, saying they had some experiments to run on the little thing, and I told him to call me back when he needed me. I took some time and spent a little bit of my money paying bills and settling some debts. By the end of the week, I was praying for a call from Doc C, and Sunday night, he obliged. "I could use a set of eyes next week if you're free." I told him I'd be there, and pumped my fist in excitement. When he took the hood off Monday, he was rewarded by a "whoa" of interest from yours truly. The little sucker had a toothless mouth that it seemed to be opening and closing like a fish out of water. I came in Sunday to find it had grown it. "It's pretty interesting stuff," Doc C told me. "Has it spoken to you before tonight? Some of my assistants claim it has spoken to them by way of telekinesis, but you don't seem to have suffered any of the symptoms they've talked about." "Thankfully not, Doc. All this little guy does is float and make me money." Doc C nodded, looking thoughtful before leaving and locking me in for the night. I had just brought my phone out to start scrolling Reddit for the night when I heard a muffled voice from somewhere. I looked up, thinking someone was outside the door, but the door was solid wood. I looked at my phone to make sure I wasn't accidentally butt dialing somebody, but that's when I heard the slight tap in front of me. I looked up to see the little potato dude thing as it bumped the glass with its body, its toothless mouth forming words from behind its prison. "Hello? Are you there?" it asked, its words muffled by the water and glass. I looked at it, not sure if it could even hear me when I responded, but when it floated back a little, I guessed it probably could. "Hello, you sound different than the good doctor or his friends. Are you someone new?" "Not really. I've actually been here watching you for a couple of weeks." "Oh, you must be the one I couldn't reach. I'm glad we finally get to speak properly." I set my phone down, leaning in a little closer as I watched the little brown thing float in the off-color water that held it. "What do you mean? You only just got a mouth." "Yes, well, there are many ways that one can communicate, aren't there? I've been trying to touch your mind for weeks, but you don't seem overly receptive to my advances. Thus I had to find alternative means of communication. If we were to speak, that is." Its voice, despite being muffled by the glass, was very smart-sounding. Little dude was the smartest floating potato I'd ever met, though the list was just him at the moment. He sounded like the doc a little. He used a lot of big words and sounded like he knew a lot of stuff. I put my face a little closer to the glass as I looked at him, watching him float there and wondering what he might know. We talked a lot that night. Well, I talked a lot. The little dude kind of floated and listened, throwing something out every now and again. He wanted to know where he was and how he'd come to be in this little fishbowl and what the doc intended to do with him. I didn't know most of those things, and I told him so. He didn't seem too thrilled with that answer, but he still kept talking to me. He asked me about what I was studying and what sort of things I liked to do. I didn't pick up my phone much that night. Instead, I told the little guy about myself, and we talked for hours about nothing in particular. The clock said it was about 4 a.m. when the subject finally turned to what he really wanted. I wish now that we had just kept talking about me. "So, despite the fact that you can't leave this place, you could still take me out of the tank, right?" I snorted. "Why would you want that? It's really not much better out here than it is in there." "True, but I would very much like to experience life outside my bowl. I lack hands, or I'd do it myself, but you could help me out." "Sorry, little dude. You're a good hang, but I promised the doc that I wouldn't take you out. I think it was in one of those papers I had to sign to get the job." "Oh, no one has to know. You could take me out for just a second and then put me right back in." Its voice sounded kind of sneaky as it pressed its side against the glass. "No," I said, looking at the door like I'd been doing something wrong. I really shouldn't. Please, you have no idea what it's like to live in your own filth. Now that I have a mouth, I can constantly taste the stagnant water I live in. It's pure hell." "Dude, stop. That's not cool. You know I can't take you out. I told the doc But then it did the last thing I would have expected. It started to cry. I don't mean it was pretending to cry. The thing started loosing these tortured sounds that made me think that someone was going through a bad breakup. It sounded super hopeless, and it began to bump its body against the side of the glass. I picked up my phone and tried to ignore it, but it's hard listening to something that just cries and cries like that. I had a roommate once that just kind of gave up after his girlfriend dumped him, and he just lay in bed and cried until his parents finally came to get him. I never saw the old dude again, but I can still hear his sobs sometimes when I close my eyes. It was heartbreaking and infuriating, and I wanted to console him as much as I wanted him to shut the hell up. Please let me out. I can't stand this anymore. I need to get out. I need to get out. I need to get out. It yelled and screamed, begged and cried for an hour and a half, and when the key turned in the lock, I was never happier to see the doc. Doc C looked at the little creature in the jar and asked me what had happened. Nothing. It just started talking after you left, and when I wouldn't let it out, it started screaming and crying. Far from being angry or disturbed, Doc C seemed amazed. He started studying the thing through the glass before I reminded him that I was done for the night and needed to leave. He pulled himself away begrudgingly before handing me my money and putting the sack back over my head. I found an extra 100 in the pile that night, for my suffering, I supposed, and thought about not coming back that next night. The blubbering and crying had been a lot to handle, but I couldn't deny that the money was good, and it was helping me pay down a lot of my outstanding debts. Another month of this, and my rent would be paid for the next year. Another 2 months, and my credit card would be paid, and I could afford a new flat screen for the living room. The thing's wailing was a lot to handle, but what was a little more next to my financial freedom? I made sure to pick up some earplugs before I came back the following night, and that's how I spent the next week. In that week, the little creature grew an eye and 4 small fingers, 2 on each side of its body. The night I arrived to find it had an eye, it told me all night how I looked like a kind person, and how it didn't understand how I could just sit there and watch it suffer. The earplugs helped a little, but it seemed like I could still hear it through the plugs. It would start out trying to talk to me, trying to flatter me, trying to reason with me, but we would always end up with it crying and me trying to ignore it. It became harder and harder as time went on, and every night seemed to be a battle to open the tank or not, and let it out or just flip the table and smash it into 1,000 pieces. In the end, it always came down to the money, and I always managed to stop myself from doing something stupid. It was Tuesday when something I hadn't considered happened, though. Tuesday night started out just like any other. Doc C brought me into the room, took off the hood, and there sat the little creature in his glass prison. It smiled at me, and I could see a couple of teeth breaking the gums. It had 6 fingers now, and they made it look a lot like a bug as they wiggled energetically. It still had only the 1 eye, but the beginnings of a nose had started to form under it. It was a repugnant little thing, but the doc left and I settled in, keeping my mind on the money, and that I just had to power through tonight. It would be over in 10 hours, and I could go back to my room and sleep. It spent the next 10 hours talking, pleading, crying, trying everything it could to gain its freedom. Well, that's not quite true. It never tried to threaten me. It probably realized that such a thing would have been pointless. It could no more have hurt me than my 2-year-old nephew could have, and decided on a different gambit. When it started its piercing wails again, I popped the earplugs in and shut most of it out. The plugs tuned the thing down to about a 2 and made it easier to ignore. I was just thinking about treating myself to some really nice noise-canceling headphones and forego the TV for another week when I saw someone familiar in a piece of Reddit news. I almost dropped the phone as I read the article, not sure what to make of it. Dr. Joseph Cranler arrested after trying to buy biological material from an undercover agent. The picture showed Doc C looking real unhappy as he was led away in cuffs. He was wearing the same clothes I'd seen him leaving the night before, and the article that followed didn't cheer me up. He'd been buying material for his experiment from a disreputable company, and finally he had put his trust in the wrong person, or maybe the right one, I guess. The agent had arrested him, and they were holding him for questioning. I felt a cold chill as I looked over at the little freak in the tank. Was this the sort of experiment he'd been buying materials for? I'd never thought to question if this thing was something the college had sanctioned or not, and now I realized that I might be part of an illegal experiment. They'd be coming for me next, me and this thing, and they'd assume that I was the Igor to his Dr. Frankenfurter or whatever. As the creature wailed and thrashed, my brain started putting blocks together that it should have a few minutes ago. My biggest problem wasn't that they would think I was involved. It's that if they didn't come and the doc didn't come, I would have no way out of here. I was trapped with this little crying dude for God knew how long. I thought about calling for help, but that would be bad too. What if they thought I was part of this? I'd have a hard time convincing them that I had nothing to do with this when they found me with the evidence. What's more, all the doc had to say was that I was his assistant, that he'd paid me, and I'd be in the same prison chow line as him. I started looking around the room for an escape route, but there was nothing. We were locked in. The little creature kept asking what was happening, but I just kept ignoring him. There were no windows, no other doors, not even a vent to squeeze into like in the movies. All the while, the creature wailed and pleaded to be released. It knew something was wrong, and it wanted to be set free. It could help me. It could get me out of here. It could do anything, as long as I would take it out of this tank. After searching the little room again and again, I finally just sat and tried not to go crazy. My phone will make calls, but I have no idea how to tell anybody where to find me. I tried to explain to the police what was happening. I even mentioned Dr. C, but I think the dispatcher thought I was high. They started hanging up on me when I called back, and if they trace my number, all they're going to find is my dorm room, which is empty. Luckily, I have a charger on me, so I can keep calling out and trying to get someone to help me. I checked the fridge, and there's enough bottled water and snacks in there to last for 3 or 4 days. Less if I feed this little bastard. I'm not even sure what it eats. I've never been given any feeding instructions for him, and I'm not going to waste my food on this squalling thing. I threw a tarp over it, but it isn't doing anything to dull the screaming. It sounds like he might have grown more mouths, because I can hear his shrill little voice from every angle as it bounces off the walls. One thing's for sure, if it doesn't stop screaming soon, I'm going to give him some kind of release. If it goes on for much longer, I'm going to wrench the lid off that tank and stomp the life out of him. If somebody doesn't come to help me soon, I'm going to release him from his suffering forever. Hey guys, I'm back again with an update. It's been a couple of days, and the food is just about gone. Luckily there's a sink in the corner, so I don't have to worry about water. It tastes a little metally, but it hasn't made me puke, so I guess it's fine. For some reason, there's a bag of cat food in the corner too, so I guess if it comes down to it, I can eat that. Okay, now on to what you're really interested in. The little potato dude is okay. He's still a weird little guy, but I haven't had to smash him yet. I know what he eats now, but that's getting a little ahead of myself. We've come to an understanding, but it definitely took us some time to get there. The first day was definitely the worst. As I tried to find a way out of the little room, the little guy just kept screaming to be let out. The longer he screamed, the more he started to sound like a baby crying for food. I swear I could hear him through my headphones, and after they died, I was stuck with just the sound of him crying. I alternated between charging my phone and charging my earbud case, but sometimes I still was left listening to the little guy scream. He cried till about midnight, and that's when I kind of snapped. I picked up the tank, now more like a fish tank and less like a jar, and stared through the glass at him. It must have been pretty scary, because he stopped yelling and just stared back at me with his multiple eyes. He had so many. They were all over his body, and he had a little staring contest with me before I finally told him to shut up, or else I'll smash your little tank and squish you like a bug. He seemed to think about it, and when he nodded, it was like his whole body nodding. We had some silence after that as the two of us sat and made our little plans. Thought about calling campus security again, but when I tried, they just thought I was goofing. I tried to explain to them where I was and what was going on, but they just told me not to play games and hung up on me. I tried 911 too, but they said the same thing. Heck, the lady at 911 threatened to call the police if I kept calling. And I told her to go right ahead. Maybe the police could find me better than the campus security. But since they haven't broke down the door yet, I guess not. It was about 3 a.m. the next day when I finally thought to look at the tank and found him watching me. "Well, you got any ideas?" I said, making the little guy jump. He seemed to think about it, but before he could say it, I cut him off. "And don't say I let you out of the tank." "Fair enough. In that case, I have nothing to add yet." "Terrific," I said, putting my head in my hands and staring at the floor. "Have you perhaps thought about the vents or the drains?" I had, but they were all too small for me to climb into. There was a drain in the floor, but Couldn't even put a foot in there. The ventilation shaft was an idea, but most of them would be too snug. I'm kind of a beefy guy. Not muscular, but kind of fat, and getting stuck in the vent sounded like a terrible way to die without anybody realizing it. Yeah, obviously, I'm too big to fit through those. A problem I do not have, the creature reminded me, more than a little smugly, too. Back to that again. And what's to stop you from just leaving me hanging once you get out? The little dude didn't say anything for a few minutes, contemplating his next move as I Googled like a madman. I was looking for blueprints for the college online, since a place like this would have to have them filed. See, I'm not super smart when it comes to math and science and stuff, but I know a little bit about building permits and filing your blueprints with the city. If this place was built by the college, then it had to exist in the public sphere, right? After a few hours of looking with no results, I was ready to throw my phone down. I went and grabbed some kale chips out of a little fridge, munching them sullenly as I tried to come up with a plan. The little guy was back to looking at me, and I couldn't help but notice that something had changed. All the eyes on his body opened and closed, but they were never all open at once. He also looked tired, maybe even a little pale. I looked down at the bag of chips and thought again about how I might have to feed this little dude at some point. Do you need to eat? It's been about 24 hours since Doc was here, and I don't think I've ever been here when he feeds you. The little creature pulled its lips up in a sad little smile. You couldn't feed me what I want. I don't eat normal food, and you aren't equipped to give me what I need. Started to get a little offended. What's that supposed to mean? It looked at me, and I felt a little shudder ripple over my skin as it did. I feed on brain waves. Creative brain waves, to be precise. The doctor feeds me by just being around me like his lab assistants did. You, however, don't seem to create the same way he did. You look at your little device all the time and it makes your brain waves taste bland and unappetizing. That's why the doctor's assistants kept getting headaches. The more they created, the more I fed. The doctor doesn't get them because his mind is like a wellspring. You, on the other hand, are incapable of nourishing me. You simply don't think the same. I sat back, not sure whether to be happy that I couldn't feed him or offended that he was saying I was too dumb. In the end, I guess I just decided to roll with it. Well, I guess we're both stuck then. You need to eat brainwaves and I need to eat food. We can't get either here, so what do we do about it? Is there anything in here you can use to break open the door? The creature asked hopefully. Checked already. There's some lab equipment in the fridge, the table you're on, chair I'm sitting in. Other than that, not much. There's books, but none of them are going to get us out of here. I kept searching my phone for something that looked familiar in the blueprints, but it was getting frustrating. Ugh, if only I knew where we were. If I knew the name of the building, I could find the right map or tell security where to find us. Wait, is that all you need to get us out of here? It asked, floating close to the side of the tank so it could look at me. Well, yeah, if I knew where we were, then I could tell security where we're stuck. I know where we are, it said, and it sounded a little less smug and a little more sinister when it said it. I stared back at it for a few minutes, waiting for it to fill me in. It sat there for a few seconds, waiting for me to ask the question. Well, you gonna tell me or what? Why should I? It said. If I tell you, then you'll just leave, and I'll be stuck here. What guarantee do I have that you won't just leave me once you've gained your freedom? The little son of a bitch had me there. There would be nothing to stop me from just leaving him here to die in that tank. Without any brain waves to gobble, he'd shrivel up and die. Maybe that's what he deserved, but I just couldn't bring myself to hate him like that. Little dude had never done me wrong, and I couldn't mess up my karma by shafting him like that. I promise that if we get that door open, I'll take you with me. And release me? He asked, Hedging. Dude, if you get us out of here, I'll take you to SeaWorld and release you, if that's what you want. The kale chips are going to run out soon, and if I starve, you are SOL, little bud. You might not be able to eat my brainwaves, but you can't open your tank either, or dial my cell phone with those little baby fingers. Whether we like it or not, we kind of need each other right now. The creature nodded, bumping its little head against the side of the tank. Agreed. I will have to trust in your honor, I suppose. Bruh, I'm chock full of honor. I've never welched on a promise, and I'm not going to start now. Very well, then, it said with a little smile. The building is called Rashley Laboratories. At least, that's what the assistants always thought of when they thought about it at all. One of them thought it was spooky when they walked through it to get here, and the image led me to believe that it might be abandoned. I already had the cell phone out, Googling as he finished. There was no Rashley Laboratories, but there was a R. Ashley Science Hall. It had been abandoned in the 90s after an explosion in the science wing, but the campus had never torn it down for some reason. It had been named a historic building in 2009, and while they had renovated the outside to make it prettier, the inside was pretty much untouched. Sounded like a great place for a secret lab and a covert experiment. Campus security picked up on the second ring, and I sighed when I realized it was the same guy I'd dealt with the night before. Campus security, Officer Rob speaking. How may I help you? Hey, yeah, I talked to you last night before you hung up on me. Hey, I remember you. You still playing this game? This has got to be getting old by now. Look, just listen. We're stuck in the R. Ashley Science Hall, and I need help. There was silence as he digested that. Okay, nice try, but that building's been closed for years. Pretty sure the doors never even opened. How exactly did you get in there, if you are actually stuck in there? It's hard to explain, I said, looking at the little potato dude as I thought about how to start. I got time. Let's hear the whole story, he said, pretending to be interested. To hell with it. I decided I might as well lay it all on the line. I'm sitting down here with Dr. Cranler's experiment, the one he got arrested for buying stuff to make. He pays me to sit down here and watch it at night, but the door's locked, and I need someone to let me out. The line was quiet for a few seconds. Then Officer Rob started to laugh. Wow, great story. I love the little name drop, but I'm kind of busy to be going down to an abandoned building and tromping through dust right now. Why don't you call back when... Fine, I said, deciding to take another direction. Maybe I'll just call the feds and let them know that I have a highly illegal experiment that Dr. Cranler was working on and that the college was probably helping to fund it. Then, when they ask why campus security didn't take the call, you can tell them how you thought it was a big joke and didn't look into it. That's probably going to make you look real great, buddy. There was silence for a minute, then a big sigh from Rob. Okay, kid. It's at least worth a look, I guess. Give me your cell phone number so I can call you from my security phone when I get there. You can help me find you since you're so lost. I looked at the potato dude, putting my hand over the phone as I whispered, Got any other ideas about how to find us? He looked like he was thinking before nodding and saying he could probably guide him to us. So that's where we're at now. Help seems to be on the way, and I'm updating you guys as I wait for the security dude to call back. I'll post again when I have an update, so stay tuned for more news. Wish me luck. Hopefully we make it out of here pretty soon, because one more kale chip and I might need a barf bucket. Hey everybody, it's been a minute, but I figured I'd bring you up to speed on everything that's been happening. So needless to say, I got out, but the story of how it happened is wild. So there we were, me and the little potato dude, just waiting for the security dude to call us back when the little guy got chatty again. Do you think he can get us out? He asked, not seeming sure. I mean, if anyone can get us out, it'd be him, right? What do you base this on? I had to think about that for a minute. Well, he's security. It's their job to protect people, right? If anyone should be able to get us out, it should be them. It was the little dude's turn to think, something he did by slowly breathing in and out as his body puffed up and shrank again. I will have to trust in your experience on this matter. The only thing I know about security is that they give people tickets and yell at people for parking where they shouldn't. I laughed. Sounded like some of Doc C's assistants had run afoul of campus security a few times. What do you know? I asked suddenly, kind of interested in what this little guy had collected. What do you mean? He asked. I mean, like, you take in all your knowledge through people's thoughts, right? What kind of information do you have? Even if you could get out of that tank, what would you do? Could you take care of yourself out there? The creature seemed to consider it for long enough that I wondered if he was going to answer me or not. He mostly just floated there, bobbing in his little tank like one of those gross toys I used to see at KB when I was a kid. I turned back to my phone thinking I'd struck a nerve, and when he spoke up, it made me jump a little bit. I know lots of things academical. I can solve great mathematical problems, decipher scientific formulas that would leave your peers drooling, and compose written works that would rival the greatest minds of this and many other times. What I cannot do, however, is remove my own lid, take myself from this place, or, I'm coming to doubt, breathe the air that you take for granted. I do not know these things for a fact, but I've come to suspect them heavily. I may need your help more than I suspect. As little as I know, you want to help me. I shrugged, not needing long to think about it. The little potato dude was gnarly looking, but he and I had grown a little close, despite myself. If he helped me out here, I wouldn't mind helping him do the same, even if it meant finding him a place in the world. That's what you did for someone who helped you. At least, that's how it always been for me. We would see if I still felt that way when the time came, but as far as I was concerned, I was as much in his debt as he was in mine. I had just opened my mouth to say as much when the phone rang from the corner of the card table. The number wasn't one I had saved in my phone, so I figured it must be the security dude. "Took you long enough," I said, picking up the phone and realizing it was just about an hour since I spoke to him. "I mean, I can go back to my desk and let you manage on your own if you'd prefer." He must have taken my silence for acknowledgement of my error, and I heard keys jingling as he hopefully tried to open the door to the R. Ashley Science Building. "So, where are you then? I don't see any footprints in the dust that's laying pretty thick everywhere, so it's not like I can trail you." I looked at the little potato dude, needing his help for this part. I'd always been blindfolded when the doc brought me down here, so I was next to no help. The little dude closed all his eyes for a minute, contemplating his next move, and when he opened the largest pair again, he sounded sure of his directions. "Tell him to go down the hall and find the 5th door on the left." "Go down the hall and find the 5th door on your left." "All right," the security guy said. I could hear his footsteps over the phone as he walked. "Hey, you said it was just you in there. Who's that I hear with you?" I started to tell him it was the experiment I had told him about, but decided against it. "Just a friend. We're both trapped in here and need to get out." He said, stopping suddenly and taking his keys out. The jingling over the phone was maddening, but as he slid it in, I heard the creak of an old door and found I remembered something. I remembered walking 30 steps. I'd started counting just to have something to do, and then hearing a spook house creak as the door opened. I didn't know where he was, but I knew that creak. Okay, I'm in one of the old science labs. Now what? I could hear his feet scuffing as he moved inside, and I looked back to the little potato dude for further instructions. "Tell him to go into the broom closet behind the teacher's desk and find a door in there." I conveyed these instructions and heard him scoff as he took out his flashlight. There's no door in here, just bookshelves. If this is a trick, I swear I'm gonna. Tell him to pull on the left one closest to the door. The hidden door is behind that. It's the left one, closest to the door. It's behind there. I could hear the security guard sighing in exasperation. Sounds like some Scooby-Doo bullshit to me. But when I heard the scrape of a shelf coming off the wall on hinges, I knew he was on the right track. After the door creaked, there were more steps followed by a scrape of wood on tile as something slid open. It was freaky to hear it all from someone else's end, but it gave me confidence that he might actually find us. Okay, there's a door here, and he opened it, creating a metallic sound. There's a stairway that goes down into a basement. The security guy sounded a little less sure of himself now, and that was good because it meant he might actually take this seriously. If he thought we were college kids running a goof, then he would probably leave us to our fate. If he believed that we were real and that we were being real with him, then he might come and save us. I heard him descending the stairs with slow, deliberate steps, and when he came to the bottom, he gasped a little bit. "What the hell is this?" What do you see?" I asked. "Some Frankenstein shit. There's coils and glassware and all kinds of things. It's not dusty down here either. Looks like someone might have been living down here until very recently. This is wild. I guess you kids weren't kidding." "There's a door on the left-hand side of the room. Tell him to go through there." "Go through the..." I started, but when I heard the thump of an old door being pushed open, I knew he had heard the little guy. "Holy crap," he said. Suddenly there was a rush of air and a loud clatter. The heavy breathing I'd been listening to was gone, and the silence that replaced it was worrisome. Had something gotten him? Did Doc C have other experiments roaming around other than the little potato guy? Were they maybe a little more dangerous? Hey, are you okay? What's going on?" There was nothing. "Hey, answer me. Are you okay?" Still nothing. "Seriously, dude, are you..." "He's fine," the potato guy said, and I looked up in surprise. "He's close now. I can sense his mind. He's very surprised by what he's found in that room. It's made him think a lot, made his mind create images." I felt a little sick watching the potato dude talk about it. His deformed tongue was sliding over his little stone teeth, and he'd have been salivating if he hadn't been floating in water. I realized this was how he ate, how he fed on others, and I was suddenly very glad that he couldn't do that to me. It was like watching something intimate, and it made me feel dirty. "Hey, you still there?" Security dude yelled, and I put the phone back to my ear as I told him I was. "Good, sorry about that. It's just, some of this stuff is wild. I've never been in a science lab like this before. This is the weirdest place I've ever found myself in." "Tell him we are on the far side of the room, the third door with the padlock on it," the potato dude said. I didn't bother to relay the message. I stood up and pounded on the door with my fist, shouting for him to come get us. I yelled that it was me, the guy on the phone, and he needed to get us out of here. I heard running on the phone, and then a minute later, I heard his voice as he spoke through the crack in the door. "Hang tight, buddy. I'll have you out of there in a jiffy. I have to find something to break the lock with." The phone line went dead, but I hardly needed it anymore. I could hear him on the other side, rifling through things as he tried to find something to break the lock with. It was pretty clear that he believed us now, and the knowledge that we were actually in trouble made him remember his duty. Saving a couple of students from danger was probably one of those things the school gave you an accommodation for, and he wanted to look good for his boss. "That's right," the little potato thing whispered to itself. "You'll be a hero once you get us out of here. You'll let us out, and they'll know how great you are." "You okay?" I asked. but he shushed me as he continued to whisper, "You'll be a hero. You'll be the boss. And you can finally get a spot on the force with a feather in your cap like this, just like your father always wanted you to." From the sounds on the other side of the door, whatever the little guy was feeding him, it was working. After about 10 minutes, I guess he finally got desperate. "Step back from the door," he said. I'd taken only a couple of hesitant steps back before a loud bang came from the room. It was followed by 3 more loud pops, and I started to wonder if security dude had pulled out a gun. Whether he was a bad shot or the lock was just too thick, I don't know, but after the 4th shot I heard something thump against the outside of the door, followed by the door opening to reveal our savior. He was young, 19 or 20, with khaki pants and a dark blue polo that said campus security on it. He still had the gun in his hand, something I wasn't sure I'd seen any of the others carry. His blonde hair was all stuck up and his face looked flushed, but he was a welcome sight nonetheless. "Thank God," I breathed, walking over to shake his hand. He had opened his mouth to say something, but when he saw the little dude in the jar, his face turned like bad milk. Jesus Christ! What the holy hell is that?" he said, raising the gun to point it at the tank. He's a friend, I said, trying to assure him. He helped me guide you here. He won't..." But as I looked at the tank, I realized I might be wrong. The little dude had all his eyes open, and they were focused on our new friend. Security dude was staring back at him, and I saw that he'd begun to shake a little. The hand with the gun had especially began to shake, and he seemed to be losing a battle to keep it at his side. His eyes were locked on the little creature, whose multiple eyes were locked on his in turn. The veins in his head were starting to bulge. I took a step back, not sure what was going on here, and when the security dude started to scream, I saw his eyes roll up to the whites. His eyes began to leak, looking like he was crying blood, and when he fell over, I saw that blood was coming out of his ears too. We stood in silence for a few seconds before I could find the words to speak to the little dude. "What the hell was that?" "Sorry about that," the little potato guy said. "I was so hungry that healthy brain waves were too much to pass up." "So you killed him?" "To be fair, he was thinking about shooting me. It was right on top of his brain, and if I hadn't acted, he would have shattered my tank and possibly ended my life." He turned to look at me then. The feeling of those eyes on me was extremely unsettling. "I had to kill him, you understand. He was threatening me. And when you threaten someone, they're allowed to stand their ground. It was self-defense, plain and simple." The things he was saying were basically true, but didn't make the body lying on the floor any less terrible. "So what do we do now?" I asked, not sure what someone did with a dead body. "We leave him here. I would venture a guess that he isn't the only body down here. Are you ready to escape?" I nodded, grabbing my charger and my earbud case as I slid my phone into my pocket. The little dude's tank proved a bit more difficult, but not much. It was like carrying a fish tank, somewhere between a 5-gallon and a gallon bowl. As I started to settle it, I heard the last thing I expected to hear down here in the dark. It took a few minutes to click in all the insanity, but it was the theme song to Chips. I settled his tank on the table and looked back at the dead security dude, noticing the light flashing in his pocket. It quieted now, but as I approached, it started ringing again. It vibrated the pool of blood gathering around him, and I felt like a grave robber as I slid my hand into his pocket. Closing my eyes, I slid it out and looked at the screen, instantly feeling foolish. Did I expect to recognize the number? Did I think it would be someone I knew? As I slid the toggle to answer it, Catching it on the fifth ring, I heard someone breathing heavily on the other end and said hello. Officer Giraffe, this is Agent Max. We spoke a minute ago. Dr. Cranler hasn't been very forthcoming with information, so if you have any actual information about his latest experiment, we would very much like to take it into custody. Have you secured it yet? I looked at the potato dude, but he didn't seem to have any answers. Officer Giraffe, are you there? Hello? I tossed the phone into the inky blackness of the next room and went back to scoop up the tank. It appeared that our times table had been moved up a little bit, depending on what security dude had told the Fed dude. Get the keys, the little guy whispered, nodding his lumpy head at the officer dude. I nodded, seeing the wisdom in it as I unhooked them from his belt. I settled the tank in my arms as we headed into the room beyond. The security guy had been right. It was certainly something to see. There was a dim light that shone from the top of the ceiling, and I could see all kinds of things in the dark space. Silver tables, big tanks filled with liquid, small trays with instruments, and shelves upon shelves of things too small to make out. I suddenly wanted to see them all, to inspect every one of them, but I didn't have time. I did see that ours wasn't the only locked door. 3 others were still padlocked shut. What would I find behind those, I wondered, but I didn't have the time or the aim to investigate today. I jogged out of the room and into a little room that did look like it belonged to Dr. Frankenstein. A desk sat in front of a huge double shelf of books, and the rest of the room was taken up with more tables and electrical coils and all kinds of weird equipment. I didn't have names for all of it. It all pulled at me to come look, but I saw the stairs calling me louder, and I ran up them as fast as I dared and into the dusty old broom closet. We were heading through the silent classroom when we saw the flashlights through the windows. I crouched, the little dude making grumpy noises as he sloshed in the tank. Outside, there were about a dozen guys with lights searching around the building. It appeared that security dude had told them where we were, and now we were stuck. I looked at the tank, the lights and voices moving just outside the window, and asked the little dude if he knew another way out. I don't know, the little potato guy said. Let me think for a moment. Better think fast. They could be in here any minute. He floated in thought, all his eyes closing again, and I was forced to listen to the chatter just outside the window. He said the R. Ashley Hall, right? Said a voice I recognized from the phone. Yes, sir. He definitely indicated this building. I can't raise him. It's possible he went in by himself, and whatever was in there eliminated him. We need to get inside. One of you go see if anyone else works security. I need keys to the building, and I found it, the little guy said, turning me back to face him. There's a back door and a spot one of the assistants went to smoke sometimes. It's probably locked, I said, bemoaning our luck before remembering the ring of keys that were sitting in my pocket. Which way? I asked, getting up as I lifted the tank. Last door on the left. It's a little kitchen area with a door to the outside. I stayed low, trying to make it under the windows as I duck-walked to the door. The hallway was dusty, the unused corridors particularly covered in it, and as I crept past the doors, I could hear voices headed from the front of the hall. That was good, because if they were all in the front, then no one was going to see me go out the back. I tried the door, but wasn't too surprised when it was locked. The ring of keys looked huge as I finagled it out of my pocket. I started trying them one at a time without any real clue which one was the right one. I had just found one that would slide into the lock when something hit the door hard enough to send dust flying everywhere. I almost dropped the keys, my fingers finding the middle of the ring as they slipped out of my hand. I found the key I had lost pretty quickly, and as I came through the door, I heard the front door starting to groan under the battering of the feds. I stumbled into the kitchen area, turning to close the door and lock it back. No sense making it easy for him. I went to the back door, and with some luck, the same key opened it as well. We went out the door and onto the lawn of the college before anyone was the wiser. We must have looked pretty wild as we made our escape through the low shrubs. We were staying low, me still hanging onto the tank for dear life, and when a little dude shouted at me to get down, I sat down and put my back against a nearby tree. I sat there catching my breath, wondering why he'd told me to stop, when suddenly there was a flashlight around the back. I dared a little peek and saw a woman in a suit waving the light around as though looking for something. I popped back behind as she started sweeping our location and held the tank tightly as I prayed she wouldn't see us. The potato dude could roast her, but that would certainly draw attention. Our best bet was to stay clear and hope they moved on. Agent Fiss, report. Sir, the back door is open, and I held my breath, breathing slowly as I tried to keep my breathing from giving me away. Excellent work. That explains why the front door was locked. Officer Draft must have gone in through here. Let's go. We have our entry point. As they piled in, I noticed that her light was still trained on the area we crouched in. Sir, I was thinking that a search of the area might be in order. If the subject escaped through the back door, we could... There's no sign of forced entry on the door, Agent Fiss. It's more likely that this was how the officer entered the building. Come on, we may need every hand to bring this creature in. The lights retreated, and I finally felt like I could breathe safely again. We made tracks all the way back to my dorm room, and that is how me and the little dude became roommates. It's been pretty chill since then. Pato lives in my room now, and the two of us live pretty comfortably. He's looking better these days. All the creativity roaming the halls is enough for him to stay well fed without roasting anyone's coconut. He doesn't ask to be let out anymore either, and I set up a little TV for him so he can watch the outside world. He usually just watches smart guy stuff, but every Friday we have a little movie night, and I make him watch something less academic. We're watching Friday this week, though I'm pretty sure it'll go over his head. He's helping me with my science stuff too, and I'm thinking of changing my major to biochem next semester. He was right. He knows so much, and he's helping me know stuff too. I'm sure he's got an ulterior motive, but I don't mind. We seem to be living in a symbiotic relationship, as he says, and with the little dude's help, I can pass almost any test. He's starting to be able to beam stuff into my noggin too, so I guess we really are living simpatico. I'm still pretty careful to spend time on my phone so I don't get too creative. If I go full egghead, the little man might decide to make a tasty snack out of me too.